Sometimes it's not the tools or processes or an extra training that we lack, but in fact, it's actually finding our courage, our confidence, and our power. So join me on this very special episode as I chat with Lisa Gable, author, best-selling author, as well as speaker and U.S. ambassador, as she shares with us how to stand in our power. Let's start the countdown. Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Creator Tips, Tools, and Tales live show. My name is Fanny Dunagan, where every other week I come to you with creators, industry leaders, business leaders as they share with us their tips, tools, and tales. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. We're so glad you decided to join us here. You can either watch this live or watch it in replay. If you are watching this on replay, be sure to drop a note and say Team Replay. Let us know, and we'll be sure to respond to any questions or comments you have as well. I can see our feed filling up with people. Be sure to introduce yourself in the feed. Let people know what you do. Feel free to use this comment section to meet new connections, grow your network, meet each other. You never know what opportunities may spring up from there. So I challenge you to invite and connect with 3 new people that you didn't know before in the comments here and grow your network. I can already see, I see Anna Clark here, excited to see Lisa Gable speak. So inspiring. Yes, indeed. I see David tuning in from Dallas, Fort Worth. And let us know where you're tuning in from as well. Kelly Flowers in the house. Welcome, Kelly. You are always amazing and inspiring yourself. Kelly, just want to give a shout out to her. She is the founder of women leading technology, and it's a great association and organization. So definitely connect with Kelly if you are interested in technology. Tons and tons of people. I see Patty from Poetry, Texas. So yes, definitely introduce yourselves and let people know where you're tuning in from. And as always, I want to quickly bring in my community manager for the show, Ann Small. Ann Small is going to be helping manage all the comments and questions that we get. Ann, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. We are so glad that you're here. I am Ann Small. I work on LinkedIn, help people with their strategy. And of course, my favorite part is helping Fanny, being the community manager at the Fanny Dunagan show here. What I'll be doing is looking for your comments and making sure you get answers. But also, there will be a prize at the end for the best comment or question. So stay tuned and keep them coming.
Awesome. Thank you, Ann. And Rebecca will put up the image of the tripod that you'll be getting once you, if you do get selected for best comment or question. So let's keep those coming for sure. Okay, so real quick before we get to our special guests, and be sure to connect with Rebecca Pulford. She's the coordinator and the live stream coordinator as well as marketing assistant here with us. And but let's get to the content tip of the week, as I do every week with you all. Okay, so this content tip of the week was inspired by a few conversations that I had this week. I was talking to several people, clients as well as partners that had upcoming webinars and in-person presentations and conferences, as well as virtual conferences. And they were just going to go and present. And I was like, are you recording yourself? Because as you know, it's all about content creation and generating that buzz for your brand. So I wanted to kind of give a reminder to everybody here that's watching the importance of recording every time you speak. The importance of that, because it becomes content that you can chop up and repurpose. So number one, any kind of virtual webinar or presentation that you're doing, make sure you get a recording of it from the organizers. And because sometimes it's on Zoom and we have our slides up, but then our face is really small in the Zoom, what I suggest is to set up your phone or another camera beside you and have that be recording your face as you're presenting on your virtual presentation. That way, at the end of the day, you'll get the recording and there'll be your slides, but at the same time, you're going to have another camera angle of your face as you're presenting virtually. And that's a great way that you can repurpose your video and content after your virtual presentation, and then you can chop that up and post it across your social channels. And then the second one is obviously if you're in an in-person event, a conference, whatever it is, make sure you try to record that. If it's too difficult to record it because there's a huge crowd and all that, one of the things that I suggest is getting a little audio recorder. I'm going to try to make this. This is one of my favorite audio recorder. It's called Tascam. Rebecca is going to drop a link to that in the comments. And that way, if you're speaking up on stage, you just tuck this little tiny recorder in your pocket and then put the lapel mic on. So at the very least, you get a great audio recording of your presentation as well. So as always, record, record, record. Be sure to get lots of content whenever you present. And that's my content tip of the week. And speaking of recording and presentations and speaking, I think that's a nice lead-in to our very, very special guest. I'm so honored she chose to hang with us for an hour. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Lisa Gable to the show. Welcome, Lisa. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I just learned so much in that tip of the day. I was taking notes over here, so thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we'll be all furiously taking notes as you speak throughout this conversation. But I want to read to everybody a quick bio of yours. You all have to listen to these credentials. Keynote speaker, Wall Street Journal and US Today best-selling author, presidential advisor, secretarial advisor, advisor to governors, US ambassador, UN delegate, corporate executive, board member, commentator. Lisa Gable has served four, U.S. presidents and 2 governors, counseled Fortune 500 CEOs, and represented global public-private partnerships and nonprofits with an end goal of moving organizations to higher levels of performance. Bipartisan in nature, she has brought together political parties, corporate competitors, and disparate nations to foster quality leadership, diplomacy, and results that better society and create sustainable partnerships and profitable business models. Wow. What do you guys think in the audience? Is she incredible or what? So welcome, Lisa. Man.
Well, thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure to meet you this summer, and I'm just so excited that we're finally doing this, so thank you.
Yeah, so just a little background. Ashley heard Lisa's keynote speech about standing in your power at the Alliance of Women Technology Summit, their leadership summit. And I was just blown away. And one of my big takeaways was that I realized that I don't dream big enough. Like hearing all these things that are accomplished. And I'd love for you to kind of like just walk us through how you kind of ended up here or how you even ended up at the White House. Can you give us a kind of like a roadmap or journey through that?
Well, it was a series of unexpected things that worked out very well. When I started interning in Washington, D.C. at the age of 18, I ended up being featured on the front page of the Washington Post with 3 other interns as an example of interns that were flooding into Washington to work for Ronald Reagan. When I was 19, I actually left my university for a period of time and took a job in the administration where they had me touring around the country talking about a topic which was privatization of student loans. And through that process, when I was 21, I was working at the Pentagon as a Reagan appointee. I was the youngest, probably the only female, one of the only females, and the youngest appointee there during the Cold War. And a friend of mine called, his name was Eric Vautour, and he said, "Lisa, I'm leaving my job at the White House. Would you like it?" Well, I was a pretty smart 22-year-old by that point, and I said, of course I would. And so I had the opportunity to serve in the last couple of years of the Reagan administration, which was truly the greatest honor and privilege.
Wow, amazing. And I want to pull this up real quick. For those of you, be sure to check out her website, lisagable.com. And it kind of shares with us a little bit of your background here, right?
It does.
Walk us through some of
It
this.
some of my story, and it tells you about the audiences with whom I've spoken. Today, I launched the site, and I'm just thrilled that Fanny gave me an opportunity to talk about it. You know, one of the things I tell everybody is right now, my goal is to help the next generation of leaders. And I'm hoping through this process of being able to go out and speak to audiences and help people learn from the experiences that I've had, that we can link arms and solve those big problems that we face today.
Awesome. Awesome. So, I mean, some of the things that, you've been in very powerful positions, positions of influence, positions of change, right? And we're always, I know that as I kind of navigated my career, it's always a little intimidating to like be in room full of decision makers, and in your case, like decisions that impact our country and all that. Like, tell us how you kind of came about and what were some of the challenges that you faced being in those kind of rooms and how to even make a stand in rooms like that. So maybe first the challenges that you faced.
Well, I think I boiled it down to sort of three challenges that I faced. One was, you can't tell, but right now I'm sitting on two pillows because I'm rather short. And so being small of stature, when I worked at the Pentagon, I weighed about 95, 96 pounds, 5 feet tall, and my feet didn't touch the ground because they didn't have chairs for women at the Pentagon. They had really big, heavy doors. And so I couldn't do anything about my size. But one of my mentors taught me, he said, speak with facts and look for that opportunity when there's the lull in the conversation. If you've done your research in advance and you've identified what's the purple elephant in the room, own it and be the person who comes prepared with facts. Don't feel like you have to rise above everybody. Wait until the conversation stops and go, oh, but by the way, have you thought about this? And that gave me a lot of power I wouldn't have had. And actually, because people underestimated me when I walked into the room. I think the other big challenge is credentials, right? And even at the age I'm at today, I've been working for almost 40 years. I'm still acquiring credentials. Everything you do, somebody goes, oh, but you need to be able to do this. Oh, you need that credential. And so getting those credentials, one thing I did is I went to grad school at night while I worked at the Pentagon and the White House. And then when I moved to Silicon Valley, I served on boards and commissions, both for governors as well as for US presidents. And so serving on different boards while working full time, particularly while I was single, allowed me to rack up a lot of credentials by the age of 29. And that leads into the third challenge. And it's a good thing I did move things forward so quickly, because when I first got married in my early 30s, my husband, about a year and a half after we were married, was diagnosed with a very rare form of cancer and 2 autoimmune diseases. And so what I recognized is, because I'd done so much work in advance, building my credibility, I was able to step back at different times and sort of zigzag through my 30s to keep my eye on where I wanted to go, but to also spend the time I needed to spend both with my husband and my daughter, who was quite small at the time.
Got it. So what I heard from you is gather those facts, credentials, and really kind of bring all that together. What did you mean by, what's a purple cow or a purple purple elephant? Tell
There's
us about that.
always that one thing in the room that nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about it. And yet it's the biggest problem. And some people may feel that, well, if we talk about it and if I don't say it the right way, I'm going to get in trouble, or I might embarrass somebody. But we all know it. We all know it. We walk into a boardroom, we walk into an office meeting, and you know that everybody knows the real problem, but no one is willing to say it.
Yeah.
What I learned is to basically, and this was the basis of my book, is I learned to integrate the manufacturing processes I learned at Intel with what I call the art of diplomacy that I learned while in the Reagan White House. Ronald Reagan was a very gracious person, but he got things done, and he was able to say things in certain ways that made sure people weren't offended in the room, that somehow brought everybody forward, but still at the same time address the fundamental problem. And so for me, sometimes I talk about the elephant. He's purple. He's wearing a tutu. He's got a crown on his head. Why aren't we talking about it? Does no one else see it? And they all do. And the irony is, men can sometimes be the most reluctant to talk about the purple elephant. So I make sure that we address it. I try to do it diplomatically in a non-offensive way. But the bottom line is, you can't solve the underlying problem you're there to solve unless you address the hardest problem.
Got it. I'd love to hear from the audience as well. Drop in the comments. Let us know what has been a big challenge that you faced when you're making a stand. We'd love to see that and address it. I saw a question. I can't quite find it just now, but one of the questions was that you've done so much in your journey. What was a moment that really brought you joy?
I love partnering with people. I just love partnering with people. There is nothing that makes me more excited than if you've been working on this really hard problem, but I always have this team of people around me. And there's something that is just magnificent when you start to crest that hill and you're doing it as a team and you're high-fiving everybody on the top, and it feels so much better. I don't understand people who want to do everything by themselves. I really don't, because in every single job that I've had, and it's one thing I talk about in my book, and if you go to the back of my book, I give credit to everybody under the sun because I've always worked in teams. So I guess the thing is, it doesn't matter what it is. I love the people I work with, and I'm still close to so many people. And some of those people have been on my team in multiple different jobs. And I guess what I would say is it gives me great joy when I call them up and they go, oh, yeah, I'm back up. I want to do it again.
Awesome. This is a great question here that we got from Sarah Azam. And you mentioned like you started off as an intern, right? And at that time, you know, we don't have the facts, we don't have the credentials yet. How do you kind of improve yourself at that point?
Well, I think what you have to do is you have to know your place. No one wants that know-it-all intern, right? They don't want that know-it-all person at all in the room. And so sometimes it helps if you prepare your boss in a way that your boss is going to be very strong in the room. It's okay not to get the credit. Sometimes we as women need to make sure that we have an opportunity to get the credit for what are our thoughts. You don't want to give it all away. But at the same time, particularly when I was 18 and interning for different people, I learned early on that nobody wants the hot shot. Instead, what they want is your boss is going to be loyal to you if you always ensure that they're prepared in advance. And at that time, if you have a really good mentor as a boss, they'll actually turn to you and go, you know what? Lisa's the one that did all the research on this. Lisa, do you mind answering the question? And I've been so fortunate in every job that I've had that I've actually had men and women who've had that relationship with me. So again, it's all about partnership and knowing when it is your time to speak up and when it's your time to make sure that somebody else is better prepared.
I love that. We got this great question from Anne. Like you obviously have lots of strengths. What do you think has been the top strength to your success?
I'm incredibly maniacally focused. Sometimes, and I've had to learn to manage that, trust me. But it's funny, when I went to work for Intel Corporation back in 1989, Andy Grove was the president and CEO of Intel. He was Time Magazine Man of the Year. And Andy used to say two things: focus, focus, focus. And the other was only the paranoid survive. And what I learned from that is to say ultimately focused on job one. What's the most important thing I need to do to accomplish my objective? Not to get distracted. And then secondarily is who's out there that's going to trip me up in the future? Where's the next point of competition? And so I would say that maniacal focus, it may drive my husband bananas sometimes, is probably my greatest strength.
Oh, wow. I love that. And like you mentioned, this career that spent all the way back to 1989, right? You've really seen how communications have changed, social media, right? We didn't even have social media back then, right? And this great question from Debbie in the audience, even now, like how has social media changed how we lead and communicate and influence versus when you first got started?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I'm so old that I remember in the Pentagon in 1989 when a group of guys from DARPA came into my office and started talking about this thing, the internet, and how we were all going to love communicating with each other on it. That's how far back I go. And then my husband got my email when we got engaged, and he said, "I'm getting you one of my first presents to you is your email." And I go, "What is it?" Lisa@Gable.com. I'm like, okay. He goes, "You're going to be very happy about that one day." So
what year was that?
That was 1994. Yeah, he was
wow.
he knew what was coming, and he said, "You're going to be so happy that you have it." And he's right. He is. So I think the thing we have to remember, and it's funny, I spent some times recently going back and actually trying to wrestle with the question, has social media changed us as we are human beings so much? Is it making us act in a different way? Or have we always acted this way, but it's allowing it to be more public, or it's allowing that communication cycle to work more quickly? And I went back and I studied, you won't believe this, I studied witch burnings in Germany in the 1600s.
Wow.
And then I went and started pulling quotes from Aristotle, Socrates, de Tocqueville, and Ben Franklin. And I'll tell you, it's an interesting exercise, because if you start pulling the quotes, it could be 2022. And what it teaches you is that we, yes, the world has improved. The manner in which we communicate and how quickly in the larger audiences to whom we can communicate have obviously grown exponentially. But the reality is, the things that we say and the things that we do and the way in which we behave, we've behaved like this for 2,000 years. And until we wrestle with our own personal behavior, we're not going to solve any of these problems.
Yeah. I once heard Gary Vaynerchuk, an influencer on social media, talk about, he said something similar to what you just said. He said, we're still the same. Social media just amplifies it all, right? Amplifies who we are, magnifies who we are. So yes, very much so. So as we kind of make a stand for things that matter, right? I know that's one of the things that's important to you. Like, why is that so important for us to stand in our power and to speak up?
It goes back to the thing that makes us human. And we really saw it, during the Cold War. We saw it during the rise of the Nazi Party in the 1930s in Germany. It's really important to stand up for what's right. And what you find is that once you do, you discover all these other people who agree with you. It is a rare person who likes to be the person who raises their hand in the room. And I have literally sat in a room with extremely powerful people and have been shocked and amazed when the CEO or the president of the United States asks a question. Nobody wants to answer it. Nobody wants to answer it. And there's this hesitancy. There's this hesitancy we as humans have. I don't know why it's there. But the reality is, if you've thought about it, and I really do study in advance. I spend a great deal of time preparing for every single big meeting I walk into. I make sure before I meet somebody in an industry that I've studied it and I have a good understanding, as to what we're talking about. So I'm not saying just blurt something out, but what I'm saying is think about the points you want to make and feel confident that there are other people who are thinking the same thing, but they're not as brave as you are. And by being brave and by stepping forward and saying, this is a problem, the level of respect and credibility that you will gain and the level of influence and power that you will gain is truly significant.
Yeah. I'll never forget a quote I heard where it's like, speak even if your voice trembles.
Yep.
And I I always love that, because it's like, okay, I'm going to say it anyways, even though I'm scared and it's nerve-wracking. I'm just going to say it, right?
And I'm the person that gets the red neck. Oh my God, the red neck, the dead giveaway. In fact, I'm just going to be honest. You will know if I'm walking into a meeting I'm not as comfortable with. I'll be like wearing the scarf or the turtleneck, the high neck.
Hide it.
We all have our thing that, that will show itself.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from the audience. Let us know in the comments, like a nerve-wracking experience that you had, and how did you handle that? Here's a question from Pastor Devin Miller. He asks, how would you evaluate the role of women in leadership in corporate and politics? And I'm sure you've seen it kind of change over the decades as well, right?
It's a twofold answer, and I'm always very honest about this. I have found an amazing group of women that I am friends with, and some of us date back 40 years. And what we have systematically done is we've gone and found women like ourselves, women who believe that success is a team sport. And we continue to grow the relationship, and we help each other up the ladder, and we are happy when the other person succeeds. that is not all women. There are some women who aren't like that. And so, in any situation, what you want to do is you want to find that group of women who are into coming up with solutions that benefit everybody. They don't have to be the queen, but they can be the leader of a court. And what I mean by that is that they have to be willing to step aside and let somebody else lead at different points in times. They have to help the next person up. And there are women, it's funny now that I'm in my late 50s. Many years ago, there were a group of us that said, I want to be like so and so. And so there's a woman by the name of Barbara Barrett. She was Air Force Secretary, US Ambassador, on the board of Raytheon, all these other things. And I would always go, I want to be Barbara. Or I want to be like Nancy Brinker, who's a good friend of mine. And she started Race for the Cure, and she was a US ambassador. And now all of a sudden, those women are still very much out there, but they're stepping back a little bit. And it's our moment. And I think the girlfriends that I have, that we've all come up together, we're recognizing, wow, we remember when we said we wanted to be them. Well, this is our moment to be them. And we need to be as gracious and helpful and supportive as they were of us.
Oh, beautiful. I love what you just said about we don't have to be the queen. We just need to be leaders of the different courts, right? At different times, and be gracious about it. Awesome. Well, everyone, I want to play a video highlighting Lisa's career, and I want you to look out for all these very, very unique historical photos and let me know what you see in them. What did you notice when you see Lisa in some of these historical photos? So let me pull this up right now. It was fascinating. I remember seeing this at the keynote that you gave, and I was just like, wow, that's so cool. Okay, here we go. Okay, and let me.
Whether I'm working with an elected official, a Fortune 500 CEO, or a middle manager, everybody shares the same end goal. Each of you has a desire to move your organization or communities to a higher level of performance.
They not only had to rectify their image in the minds of the consumer, but they had to also do it within the minds of people.
And that's why I'm so excited to work with you to bring together your teams, your customers, even political parties or corporate competitors to foster quality leadership, diplomacy, and results that better society and create sustainable partnerships and profitable business models.
I started my career in the Reagan administration when I was 19 years old. I was 21 at the Pentagon.
Innovation is happening at dizzying paces.
So we've made things very complicated, and we need to go back to focusing on safety and efficacy.
No, I'm not exactly a wallflower, but early on, I was the odd girl out. Having to fend for myself in rooms full of foreign diplomats, global CEOs, career four-star generals, sitting, for example, at the U.S. Army War College discussing national security with men who'd seen combat. My success depended on making what mattered to me matter to others. And it's the rule I live by today, and I can help you learn to do the same thing. To build relevance for any idea you're supporting, surround yourself with smart people and use research and data as a secret weapon to open opportunities for revenue, visibility, and partnerships. Your vision will be achieved when you fully understand what went wrong in the past and forge strong alliances to develop a plan on how you'll become a catalyst for change. You want to link arms as you climb those mountains? I couldn't have reached the heights I did without building meaningful relationships.
I've also counseled a lot of people on both sides of the aisle, and libertarians, so covered all of the aisles.
Because smart leaders create bonds that show you're truly dedicated to others' success through the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows, the straight aheads and the turnarounds. And never forget, that having compassion and empathy for people, it's not only the right thing to do from a human perspective, but it pays dividends when you treat people with dignity and grace. Because the things you build speak to your impact on the world around you. Kindness, humility, generosity. That's all the part of the legacy that you're going to leave as a leader.
We're going to embrace data and process because that's going to allow us to speak with facts. But what you're doing right now is you're making success a team sport because it's also how you lift each other up.
But ultimately, vision is the critical ingredient in achieving your goals. The power of the big idea is job number one for any leader looking to create sustainable change, seeking to guide an organization, navigate a merger, or change the world.
We have amazing advances in biopharma. We have people developing competitive space transportation. And we've got Elon Musk out there talking about colonizing Mars.
I speak and I write on partnership, mentorship, diversity, and relationship building, and nothing slows me down. During the pandemic, I participated in over 100 podcast interviews and speaking engagements from my home office. Why? Because my mission is to support the next generation of leaders and organizations that are solving the world's biggest problems.
Sometimes businesses don't really understand. They've got something, they go, oh, well, it's net positive, it's bringing in revenue, but they haven't calculated how much time it's taking to produce that revenue.
Let's change the world together by making what matters to you matter to others.
I I get goosebumps watching that, Lisa. Thank you. You're really an inspiration to all of us. So, man, I want to point out something you said, making what matters to me matter to others. What do you mean by that?
We're all in Washington, and right now we're fighting with each other. And even on the internet, we're all fighting with each other. And I think the missing piece of the puzzle is that people need to understand that you need to influence other people. You need to bring people over to your side. And the only way you can bring them over to your side is if you listen to their point of view and incorporate their point of view into the solution set that you are advocating for. And for me, it's not making it my idea is so important, I need you all to listen to it. It's, I have a dream. I want the world to be a better place. I think the technology I'm working on or the project I'm working on is going to make the world a better place. But first, what I need to do is understand I don't have all the answers. And more importantly, if you're solving a problem, you need to understand people's pain points. And so it's understanding that there's a process in it. And there's an attitude that you have to have. But at the end, you feel so wonderful when people are there standing with you, applauding over the finish line.
I love that. Here's a question from Patty in the audience, which I think is great. We're, as we grow, as we get other people to care about what we think matters, what is the best suggestion you have for creating a team?
It's when you first create a team, I highly recommend that you interview everybody, right? You do an audit. You sit there, you may keep this idea in your head. You may tell people that this is the end goal we're trying to get to, but then you step back and you start interviewing people. And I incorporate that also from a government perspective into shuttle diplomacy. I will fly anywhere to sit down and listen with a person, particularly if I know that they're not going to be happy about what I'm doing. And what I have found is that when I show up on their doorstep and I sit down and I listen to them and I don't say a word, and then I go, okay, this is what you told me. Is this what you meant? If I do it this way, would that solve the problem you're trying to solve? I've, through that process, managed to bring a lot of people ultimately onto my team that were diametrically opposed to everything that I stood for. And you want a big team. we're too much in our silos right now. We really do need to have that process where we're joining arms, and we're doing so in a way that we're meeting each other's objectives.
Oh, and that diplomacy, right? We're missing that. So true. And I saw somewhere in there, yes, one of the comments, just like we really needed to hear your voice and stand for unity. Absolutely. Rose Shonda has a great question here. The most recent research mentions men will apply for jobs and project confidence when they only meet 30% of requirements. And on the other hand, women will hesitate unless they meet 80% of the requirements. Did you ever face that lack of confidence or felt like imposter syndrome?
I never felt imposter syndrome. I always had this inordinate sense of self-confidence that drove my parents nuts when I was a little girl. But what I will tell you is that I have absolutely known when I walked into a room that I didn't have all the credentials they were looking for. But I still fundamentally knew that I had different attributes that I could bring to their processes that would improve them. And what I also know from having done so many turnarounds is that people have a tendency to, take the book off the shelf and do whatever that book outlines and tells you to do. And there's this temptation to just rotate the same people over and over and over again with the same resume types through a job. And then people step back and go, gosh, this thing doesn't work. Why isn't this thing working? Well, the reality is maybe you need to bring in somebody different. So I guess the answer to your question is, even if I knew I didn't have all the characteristics, I still knew that maybe bringing in a different attitude, bringing in a different set of experiences could actually help accelerate them forward. So part of making what matters to you matter to others is in that job interview, you may need to move them to considering you. When I first went for my scholarship at Georgetown, I had a fully paid scholarship. I put myself through college, fully paid scholarship for my graduate program. The program was 85% men. All of those men were mid-career military and national security professionals in the intelligence agencies on Capitol Hill. I was 20 years old when I applied for the scholarship. I didn't initially get into Georgetown. I walked into the office and I convinced them why they had to let me into the program. 85% men, all in their late to mid 30s. This one tiny little girl went in there just bound and determined that they had to let her in. And I talked my way into the program. And to this day, I still am sitting here going, gosh, wow, I'm not quite sure what did it. It definitely wasn't my test scores.
I love it. Just talk yourself in. And I mean, you said something in your video, like making success a team sport, right? Can you expand on that?
We can't do it alone. There is not one human being that can do everything by themselves. I think the beauty of the way our founding fathers set up our government is they actually knew we needed checks and balances, but they also knew that we needed it to be about we the people. And that is a fundamental part of being an American. It's we the people. We the people guide this democracy. And in every step that we take, we are so much stronger and actually happier if we are constantly working with a group of people. And as I say, reaching back and pulling somebody up behind you, or reaching up and asking somebody else to pull you up. It's so more dynamic. It's richer in experience. And it's pleasurable. There's happiness in it.
Absolutely. Now, a big part of this show is about putting yourself out there, creating content. And obviously, we had 2 years of, the pandemic and, just being left to do podcasts and virtual appearances. And you went on over like 100 podcasts. And sometimes I have people say to me, and they're like, "Oh, I'm too old to get on social media. I'm not versed in it. I'm too old to kind of put myself out there." And you're just continually going out there. Give us some advice on that, and for people that might be struggling with that.
Well, part of it is I love to talk with people. And so during the pandemic, my husband and I were on our farm for about 18 months and didn't see anybody. So the only way I could talk to people is doing it like this, right? Having an interaction with people, even if it was virtual. Secondarily is I love meeting new people. I love adding people to my team. I collect people. I know it sounds strange, but I just love diversity of people in my life. And so through the pandemic, what am I doing? I'm sitting at home. I was on a farm. I wasn't seeing anybody. So I would get a note on LinkedIn and I would do research on the person. I would make sure that they were credible and there wasn't anything embarrassing in the podcast that they were doing. But it was a way to get to know new people. Some people had millions of people in their audience, and some people had 20. You know what? I didn't care because I wanted to support. Like, I had a lot of young people who called me or sent me notes on LinkedIn and they said, would you be on my podcast? And so they'd explain to me what they were trying to do. And I just felt so great being able to help them build an audience. In other cases, there are issues about diversity and health equity that are very important to me that I've been working on for quite some time. And so when I would have a young person or an individual, maybe from a food bank, who had started a podcast or started a virtual program, a live stream like this, and they'd say, well, would you be on? That was my way of supporting their effort. What they were doing was so important. So some were huge, some were notable. One was NBC News with Lester Holt, and the other, like I said, was, Tommy the Tomato. I just love talking and being out there. And most importantly, I wanted to encourage people. People were so anxious and they were so lacking in hope that if there was anything I could do personally to help people recognize that we were all in this together, we're still out there, we're still having these conversations, that was important to me at that point in time.
Oh, inspiring. I'm going to pull up two comments that I saw because I think they relate to each other. First of all, everyone, and I even said this to you when you were like sitting there. Okay, everyone look at Lisa Gable right there. That look right there. I said, Lisa, you look so presidential. And Debbie in the comments here, she's like, what a breath of fresh air. Lisa Gable, why aren't you running for president? Just saying, we just want to put the bug in your ear right here.
We'll let other people do that, but thank you.
But that kind of ties into David Ball's question here. He said, with all your political and societal with all our political and societal upheaval in our current society, what do you say is the biggest challenge that needs to be resolved?
I think people need to remember that it's we, the people. We have the ability to take small steps every single day in our life that impact other people in a positive way. There is nothing stopping us. I have been in communist countries. I have dealt with communist governments. I don't think until I've been in countries with oligarchs and dictators where people have been abused and power is abusive and people are afraid to talk. I think what people have forgotten is actually you can do a lot. You can do a lot. No one's stopping you. And so what I try to do is talk about small bites you can take every day. What can you, if you are talking to your Uber driver, which I talk to all of my Uber drivers, and you should, their lives are so fascinating. I met a gentleman last week who I asked him what the origin of his name was. Afghanistan, it was from Afghanistan. I said, well, tell me a little bit about when you came here. Well, he just got here. He was one of those people that fled last August. And we talked about his family, and I asked him how his kids were doing. And I told him about people I knew who were supporting the relocations of the Afghan community. And I made sure I gave him a really big tip. But I thanked him for coming and for doing what he was doing. He was working as a software engineer during the day, and he was driving Uber really early in the morning. There's so much you can do. And being gracious and nice, what you don't know is that it's all of our lives is like Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life. No one has any comprehension of the domino effect of something, if you write a letter of recommendation, if you make an introduction from between two people, all of a sudden things start to happen. Sometimes you don't find out about it for years. I found out recently that an introduction I made 5 years ago had resulted in all these very significant results. I didn't know. Nobody actually came back and told me. So don't feel like you're not going to get instant gratification, but recognize that you have the ability, whether in your church, your community, your school, in your business, on the airplane, being nice to somebody and picking up their suitcase for them if it's an elderly person or they're short like me and they can't get it into the bin. What you don't know is what happened in the person's life that day, or the challenges that they'd gone through. And any form of encouragement and support does have a domino effect. And those little introductions make a whole lot of difference.
And Carl says in the comments here, politics with civility. Imagine that. Where did it go? But this is what we need. This is what we need. Question from Dr. Carice Knight. What are your thoughts about mindful diplomacy, emotional intelligence, and at the same time finding ways to stand in our own power, right? What do you think about that?
I think mindful, if I'm understanding the question correctly, is mindful diplomacy is getting out there and talking to real people. There are the formalities of diplomacy. There are the formalities of business, right? We all have that formal element. I show up at things far in advance and I start talking to the people in the kitchens and I start talking to the servers. And then I talk to the people that are showing up in the room. I embarrass my family because I will walk up to any human being and introduce myself to them. If they're standing alone, they look lonely. I don't want to leave them over there. I think it is a matter that you have to separate formality from actually getting to know real people. There's a phrase at the FDA, it's called voice of the patient. And it's a newer concept, which is making sure that people know the life and the daily challenges of every aspect of a patient's life that may have nothing to do with their disease, but it's made more complicated by their disease. Everything in life is that. And until you're mindful of people's pain points, until you're mindful of their points of joy, until you're mindful of really what's important to them, then we're not going to be able to make all of this work. And so taking that extra time. When I was in Japan, I would go to the smallest village. I was in a St. John suit, Chanel high heels, sitting in a boat with a man who had cormorant fishing going on, because it was really important to the mayor of that city that I sat there and learned how those fish fished. I never know what the influence of that is, but I'll tell you, I have a better understanding of the Japanese people than I when I entertained the man who's now the emperor of the country.
I love that imagery, Lisa. I am literally picturing Chanel shoes and then little fishing boat. But that image in itself sums up so much to me. Like being authentically us, whether we're a woman or a man, like just own it, right? Like we love shoes. Let's have that shoes in the middle of the boardroom, right? And then at the same time, like just talking to the people, right?
Yeah.
And listening to them. Okay, this this made me giggle. Greg, thank you for the shout out. Gable Dunagan 2024. Okay, cool. I couldn't help but put that up. But you're such a breath of fresh air. I mean, as Debbie said in the comments, as you kind of move on and now you are doing more speaking engagements, paid speaking engagements, and getting your message out there, you're building your legacy, right? And you're leaving something behind for us, right? Like, tell us what you want your legacy to be and what you want to most be remembered for.
I want to be remembered for the people that I helped. And one reason is that my father passed away in his mid-80s in 2019. It was one of the impetuses for the book. And you'll see I write a lot about my father and how he influenced the person I became. But my father started a very small organization. It became a very large national organization. And yet when he died, we were overwhelmed with text and Facebook. One great thing about social media is people can find you. And I was getting these beautiful notes from people. And here's some of the stories. One was a young woman that I'd been a cheerleader with in high school. And she said, I don't think you realized it, but when I wanted to be a news anchor, and she is a news anchor today in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on a major station. She said, and I tried to get an internship. Everybody kept telling me girls couldn't be anchors and they couldn't be reporters. And your dad stepped in and he told them they were going to give me that internship. And it was with WSET in Lynchburg, Virginia. And he opened up door after door and just kept telling the men no on my behalf. There was another note from somebody else that this was like 1972, and it was a young woman, and she couldn't afford to pay her college tuition. And she sat down with my dad, and we didn't have a lot of money. And he wrote her apparently a $500 check, which at that point in time was a lot of money. And he said, look, no one told you that college doesn't have to be 4 years. It can be 6 years, and I'm going to help you through it. And you're going to have to work, but this check's going to be here to help you pay off over a period of time so that you can incrementally work your way through your college education. I never knew that story. And so what I hope, again, is that, my legacy, all the important things you did, all the titles that you have make no difference if nobody shows up for your funeral. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but if nobody's sitting there going, this is the impact this person had on me, that's really, people at the end of the day, they remember how you treated them. That's what they remember. And that's really what I learned from my dad's passing.
100%. 100%. I don't want to wrap up without talking about this. Okay, so everyone, this is Lisa Gable's book, Turnaround. We're going to provide links in the chat so that you can get this book. Lisa, walk us through why you wrote this book and what is this book about?
Well, I got persuaded to write the book by my publisher, who said, you've had all these interesting turnarounds you've done in business, government, and philanthropy. Nobody else has done that. And by the time this book will come out, which was October of 2021, we should just be re-entering the world. And this concept should be very popular. And what I did is I did take those manufacturing principles that I learned at Intel, because that's what I've used in order to do every turnaround. And here's what they are, which is visualize the future. Don't look at the world the way it is today. Think about what's your perfect world scenario. What do you want it to look like? And then go back and audit everything in the past, not just the recent past, but going back to the starting of the institution that you're involved with. Why did somebody start the thing in the first place? What problem was it supposed to solve? And is that problem still relevant today? And after you've broken down the past, what you're going to do is develop a path from your past to your future state. And you're going to do that by identifying jobs 1, 2, and 3. You can't do everything. Job 1 is the thing that you've got to do to survive, thrive, and live. It's the only thing. Jobs 2 and 3, they're your backup singers. There are other stuff you have to do, but sometimes those things can make sure, it's kind of like in football, and I'm bad at football analogies, but, making sure that one person gets over the line and everybody else is ensuring that they do because they have their functions. And because you've done this work, because you've gone through decision trees, because you've interviewed people, because you've done the audit, you kind of know what the problems are. You know what the path forward is. You're only going to pursue one thing with your 2 backup singers, so you can execute with speed, confidence, agility, and heart. And here's why heart is part of it. Every turnaround impacts people. It's not a pleasant experience. It's not a pleasant experience for the customer, for the employees, for the patient, whoever it is. It's not pleasant for the board. No one likes turnarounds, but you have to acknowledge you have to make hard decisions, but you have to be able to verbalize and acknowledge the impact your decision has on another human being. And during my last turnaround, I wrote a letter we did an 83% restructure. I wrote a letter of recommendation for every single person that we had to lay off. And I brought each person into my office and I said, what do you want to do? Not tomorrow, because I know getting a job right now is top of mind for you, but what do you want to do in the future? And then we looked at jobs that were out there. We crafted the letter so that it supported what I call their special sauce, what made them so special for this career path, and at least tried to make it an easier process. I had to let them go. We were out of money, but at least I could be human about it.
Oh, that just gives me goosebumps. Like, just literally, You had to let them go, but then here you are still writing them a personalized, customized letter of recommendation to send them off to their next career goals and adventure, right? Beautiful, beautiful. Lisa, I have 2 questions from the audience that I really want to get to. Do you have a bit more time just to go over a little bit? Okay, because I just love these 2 questions, and then we'll wrap up. Sean says, what is your take on vulnerability in leadership?
I think you need to tell people what's going on. When my husband was sick, I tried to hide it. I mean, it was chaos in our lives. He had 7 operations in 3 years. You can't hide it. And so you need to tell people what's going on. You need to be vulnerable in a work situation when there's a turnaround. One of my friends who had been at Salesforce and Cisco, she gave me some really good advice. She goes, walk into the room and tell everybody what the situation is and tell them what you have to do. And then make sure that, you know, what I did, which was the follow-ups with each person to understand how it impacted them and what their feelings were about it. You've got to, people who are standoffish and not warm, they're not the greatest leaders. They may accomplish a lot, but at the same time, I think truthfulness is key. And one thing I would encourage people with, and I talk a lot about it because of my husband, we live with diseases that we couldn't have lived with before. There's so many people around you who have a family member, they themselves, somebody that they know, their parents, everybody's going through something. So be honest about it, but then recognize that, you know, we have this going on. I've got to focus on what I've got to do today. But I think it makes you a little more human.
Oh my gosh, so many golden nuggets from you, Lisa. I wanted to kind of reiterate some of the things that I've heard today, like from you, to visualize the future, to audit the past, and then to implement with speed, agility, and heart. I love that. And then truthfulness is key.
Yep.
Right. And then I think this is a wonderful last question. If you only had one piece of advice you could give us to succeed, what would it be?
Believe in yourself. Every single person has a special sauce. Every single person. You don't have to be like everybody else. In fact, it's more fun and interesting if you're not. Believe in yourself. Figure out what you're really good at. What do you really like to do? And lean into it. Own it. That's you. That's what God gave you. You know, I do believe there are a bunch of angels in heaven going, oh, let's give him that special sauce. He seems like he'd find it pretty interesting. Or let's do that for her. Who knows what it is? But the reality is, believe in yourself. You have the ability to make a difference. Every single one of you has the ability to make a difference. Just believe that you can.
Okay, everyone, make sure you go check out Lisa's website. We had so many, lisagable.com. We have so many great questions and comments. I'm going to bring on Anne because I have no idea. There were so many good ones. Anne, tell us so many things. We're going through the feed. Are you even able to pick a winner?
Well, you know, I did pick one out, but I changed it because at the end, the one that Patty asked kind of summed the whole show up. If you were to give one piece of advice to help us succeed, what would it be? So that is without a doubt my favorite question. It summed everything up from today.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Patty.
Absolutely. Real quick before we wrap up, I just wanted to highlight real quick on October 25th, we have a ABTP Technology Cheers Tech event. It's happy hour, and all you have to do is go to abtpdfw.org, and that is from 6 to 8. And in 2 weeks, we have another author of another book I love, How to Build Your Authority Marketing from Forbes Books. Rusty Shelton will be here. So definitely, if you want to build your authority in your area of expertise, make sure you tune in for that. And then November 16th, I'll be hosting the CG Hour, and we're going to talk all about the future of the workplace for the tech industry. Lisa, thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you for your time, for your inspiration, for giving me goosebumps. I think some of you in the audience felt that thrill and that inspiration. Any final words?
No, I just really
to close
appreciate
out?
this. This is what I love. You asked what gave me joy. What gives me joy is talking to people like you all. I think you and your guest, in the mind, I'm just sitting here reading all these various questions and points, and it's just fabulous to be with you all today. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll go back and kind of address any kind of questions or comments that we didn't get to. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today for this special episode. And as always, continue to shine your light, share your gifts, share your messages, and I'll hope you do it through video. So let's close out the show. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 weeks.